Your paycheck hits your account on the same day every month. Same number. Same 4 digits, give or take. But here's the uncomfortable part. That number has almost nothing to do with what you can actually buy with it. Somewhere, right now, a trader you've never heard of is looking at a screen full of bond prices, deciding, without knowing your name, your job, or your rent, how much your salary is really worth this month. You didn't vote for this market. You can't see it. Most people go their entire lives without knowing it exists. And yet it moves your mortgage rate, your grocery bill, and the value of every dollar you've ever saved. It's called the bond market. And it is arguably more powerful than any government on earth. Let's talk about why. Here's the thing that makes this urgent right now, in the middle of 2026. Governments everywhere are drowning in debt. The US federal debt just crossed levels no peacetime economy has ever carried. The UK, Japan, most of Europe, same story, different currency. Every one of these governments needs to keep borrowing just to keep the lights on. And every time they borrow, they have to go ask someone for the money. Not voters. Not taxpayers. Investors. Pension funds. Foreign central banks. People who manage enormous pools of money and who will only lend if the price is right. That's the bond market. It's the place where governments go, hat in hand, to borrow trillions of dollars, and the interest rate they get charged depends entirely on how much those lenders trust them. Think about that for a second. The most powerful governments on the planet have a landlord. And that landlord is a market. So how does this thing actually work? Let's break it down, because the mechanism is simpler than it sounds, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. A government bond is just a loan. The government says, give us your money now, and we'll pay you back later, with interest. Simple as a savings account, except the amounts run into trillions and the interest rate is decided in real time by thousands of buyers and sellers trading these bonds every single day. Here's the part that matters. When a government looks risky, too much debt, reckless spending, an economy that seems shaky, investors don't trust it as much. So they demand a higher interest rate to compensate for that risk. Same logic as a bank charging a higher rate to someone with bad credit. That interest rate has a name. It's called the yield. And the yield on government bonds is, quietly, the single most important number in the entire economy. Why? Because everything else gets priced off it. Mortgage rates. Car loans. Business loans. Credit card rates. Even the interest your savings account pays you. All of it is built, layer by layer, on top of what the bond market decides government debt is worth. So when bond yields rise, borrowing gets more expensive everywhere. Not just for the government, for you. Your mortgage payment goes up. Your business loan gets pricier. Companies pull back on hiring because credit costs more. And all of that filters down into your salary, your job security, and what your money can buy. The government didn't do that to you directly. The bond market did. And nobody sent you a notification. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because the bond market doesn't just react to economic data. It reacts to trust. And trust can evaporate in days. Let's talk about what happened in the UK in September 2022, because it's the cleanest, most brutal example of this invisible market flexing its muscle in public. A new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, had just taken office. Her government announced a mini-budget, huge unfunded tax cuts, paid for with more borrowing, at a moment when inflation was already running hot and the central bank was trying to cool things down. The bond market looked at that plan and, essentially, said no. Investors dumped UK government bonds so fast that yields on longer-term debt spiked over a full percentage point in just a few days, one of the sharpest moves ever recorded. The pound fell to its lowest level against the dollar in decades. And buried underneath all of it was a landmine nobody outside the pension industry even knew existed: pension funds using leveraged strategies tied to bond prices, which suddenly faced massive cash demands as the value of their holdings collapsed. It became a spiral. Falling bond prices forced funds to sell more bonds to raise cash. That selling pushed prices down further, which forced more selling. The Bank of England had to step in with emergency bond purchases just to stop the entire system from seizing up. Within weeks, the tax cuts were reversed. The Chancellor was fired. And then the Prime Minister resigned after 49 days in office. The shortest tenure in British political history. Nobody impeached her. No parliamentary vote removed her. A market did. Let that sit for a second. An elected government, with a mandate, with a majority undone not by voters, but by a spreadsheet full of bond trades made by people who will never appear on a ballot. That's the quiet part nobody says out loud. In modern economies, the bond market functions like an unelected board of directors sitting above the government. Policies get approved or rejected not by public debate, but by whether lenders are willing to keep financing them at an acceptable price. Here's where the hype and the reality really pull apart. The hype, the version you hear in headlines, is that the economy is driven by growth, innovation, productivity, the story of hard work translating into prosperity. The reality is quieter and less flattering. A huge amount of what determines your standard of living is decided by whether a fund manager in London or Tokyo feels like buying government debt this week. Growth matters. Innovation matters. But none of it happens in a vacuum insulated from borrowing costs, and borrowing costs are set by a market most people can't even name. And here's the irony, the kind that would be funny if it weren't your rent payment on the line. The bond market doesn't care about ideology. It doesn't care if a government leans left or right, if it promises fairness or promises freedom. It cares about one thing: will I get paid back, and how much extra do I need to charge for the risk? It is, in a strange way, the most ruthlessly apolitical force in politics. It will punish a socialist government for reckless spending exactly as fast as it will punish a free market government for the same mistake. Truss found that out in 49 days. So what does this mean for your salary, specifically? Let's zoom back in. When bond yields rise, it becomes more expensive for your government to borrow. Governments respond by either cutting spending, raising taxes, or leaning on the central bank to hike interest rates to keep things stable. Higher interest rates make everything from mortgages to business investment more expensive. Businesses slow hiring, or freeze wages, or raise prices to cover their own higher costs. Your salary number might stay exactly the same. But the world around that number gets more expensive. That's inflation eating your purchasing power from one direction, and higher borrowing costs squeezing it from the other. Two invisible hands, both traceable back to the same market. And here's the part almost nobody connects. Your pension, if you have one, is very likely invested in bonds, the same bonds we've been talking about. So this market isn't just deciding what your salary can buy today. It's also deciding what your retirement savings will be worth in 30 years. You're on both sides of this market and you never signed up for either seat. Now zoom out further, because the implications get bigger than any one country. As global debt keeps climbing, and it is climbing, in almost every major economy simultaneously, governments become more dependent on the bond market's goodwill, not less. Every year, more of the national budget goes just toward paying interest on existing debt, which means less flexibility to respond to the next crisis, and more pressure to keep the market happy at almost any cost. Some economists call this fiscal dominance, a state where a government's actual policy choices become shaped less by what's good for its citizens and more by what won't spook the people lending it money. It's not officially anyone's decision. It's an emergent outcome of debt piling on debt, quietly narrowing the room governments have to maneuver. Which raises the real question underneath all of this. We tend to think democracy means citizens choose their economic future through elections. But if the bond market can override an elected government in 49 days, whose economy is it actually? Maybe the honest answer is that it was never fully anyone's. Maybe every modern economy is a negotiation, ongoing, unresolved, between the people who vote and the people who lend. And most of us only ever see one side of that negotiation, the side with our name on it, cashed into a paycheck we assume is ours alone to spend. The market that quietly decides what that paycheck can buy isn't hiding. It trades in plain sight, every day, on public exchanges, visible to anyone who bothers to look. Which might be the strangest part of all. It was never invisible. We just never learned to look.